little late today. As soon as I started, I had technical difficulties, so I had to fix everything again. That happens. It happens. I take a couple weeks off. We hit a different reality and I have to redo everything. So, we are going to talk about time today and the construct of time and how we are always experiencing time non-linearly and how we don't know it. So we're going to pick this apart. This is so fun. It's a great one. And I got this idea. Well, I don't know if let's say it activated. I traveled to the timeline where I'd already done this. Because I was watching the show Agatha All Along, right? And there is a episode this week about time, and this one witch says she experiences time out of order. Like her life was always out of order. She would be a kid, then she was old, then she was back as a kid. And it was very disjarring because she was experiencing time the way it is intended to be experienced. It is not linear. It is experienced out of order. For her, right? And that's kind of how they preface it. It was for her. So, but I would say it's for all of us. We experience all of our time out of order. We don't experience time linearly, and we do not experience it in the order we think we do, okay? We are always in a different... Our consciousness is always in a different space. So I've done a couple time travel videos. I feel like I'm right on the camera today. It's right up on me. I've done a couple videos about time travel and how time travel can. Let me put this down. I think that might be a little bit too much wind. Too much wind. It's very windy here today. All right, that's better. How there are different types of way the movies and media displays time travel. You can have your body traveling, your consciousness traveling. Now, I would say our consciousness is what's always traveling, We are not traveling with our body, we're traveling with our consciousness. Now, the concept comes up when we are dreaming. I would say, okay, why does it make sense? Because you're experiencing out of order. You're experiencing different timelines out of order, and they don't make linear sense because they don't lock together the way your linear mind's going to try to lock it together. It has to go in a progression where it can follow it, right? The human brain doesn't have the capacity. Now, the higher mind can. So we're going to kind of look at how we do this as humans, and then how we do this after our awakening and during our ascension and different parts of our ascension. How we're always doing it. And we don't realize that's what we're doing. We think it's something else. And it's labeled as other things. Because if we say time doesn't exist, which a lot of people will say and argue time, it is. It's just a construct our mind comes up with to order something. Right? That's why when your brain is disconnected when you're sleeping, in a sense, your human consciousness is offline. And you can expand out. You're not bound by the body. You're experiencing things how you're really experiencing them, but you're not ordering them, right? Because you don't have to. You can play, and that's why I say dream states are if you don't believe in anything, and you watch this stuff, and you're like, I don't believe in any of this shit. This is bullshit. Annette, this is bullshit. I don't believe it. Start enhancing your dream space. You can use crystals to do that. You can use ask to do that. You will find how much your dream state starts to explode, and you'll be like, yeah, maybe that's not so wrong. Maybe that weird girl's not so wrong. Maybe she's talking about some stuff that's real. Maybe she's not out there as we think she is. Okay, so if we're always experiencing time out of order, we're experiencing our life out of order, and we're all doing this all the time, how do we do it? Now, in your human form, you're going to have a human template, right? In human form, we're going to say human consciousness. When you're operating from your human consciousness, you got your human template. You're going around, you're born, you're doing your stuff, and then you're going to die. That's your human timeline. Are there different, is it different subsets to your timeline? Sure. You're going to change frequencies. You're going to get a different timeline. There's some weaves and bobs along the way, but it's pretty much going to be set in what you're doing. So even when you're young, you're experiencing it. Subconsciously, you're going in different times. You might be drawn to, I want to do this when I grow up. Because technically, in a timeline, in one of your human timelines, and I'm not going to say all your human timelines are going to be exactly the same. They're going to follow the same cadence and pattern because our human frequency, our human body, if we don't go through awakening and ascension, it doesn't shift frequency enough to shift us out of the human timelines. You can get a more upgraded human timeline, but you're not going to shift out of human timelines. You're not going fast enough. You're not going high enough. Maybe that's a different way to say it. You're not moving quick enough, going high enough through frequency to change anything really. So the cadence, it all kind of stays the same. So when you're a kid, you're going to experience it like, oh, well, I want to do this. I'm really attracted to doing this. And we can keep taking it up. We can say, okay, but I meet this person feels important. I'm immediately attracted to this person. I knew I was going to marry that person. I knew I was going to do this because you consciously went ahead and experienced that. That's how you know. It comes through as thoughts and more as feelings when you're in your human consciousness because you can't comprehend you're jumping through time. You can't understand that time is happening all at once. So I jumped to where I married this person. So when I'm meeting this person 5 months prior to that or 5 years prior to that, how fast you're going to go, I just know it's important. I know I'm going to do this because I jumped ahead and already did it. I already jumped. My consciousness is already there. I've experienced it, and I know that's going to happen. We experience it as, this is in our human consciousness now, because I'm going to show you how you're doing it all along. It's not just, all of a sudden I went through awakening, ascension, my third eye is more open than ever, and I'm seeing it all differently, or I'm seeing it all now. You're seeing it all then. Your brain is not developed enough. You haven't activated enough of it. You haven't activated higher mind consciousness through open heart consciousness to know that's what I'm doing. So it's coming through with feelings. We all had feelings where all of a sudden you'd be really happy, or you wake up and you're so, I'm so happy. Or I'm just kind of depressed today, or I'm kind of sad today. And we don't why? Nothing really going on, but I'm sad today because we're going forward and experiencing a sad moment. We would have dreams where we would experience our parents dying or someone maybe close to us leaving, whether it be through death or just leaving our timelines. And we would almost I kind of know I know that's going to happen. Deja vu is another good example of it, whether you want to say, oh, maybe I dreamed it, but when we're dreaming it, we're technically bouncing around in our timeline. We're not living it linearly. That's how you know what's going to happen. That's how you have an inkling of which way to go. That's why you know what you're supposed to do. Even as humans, even though we're still on the ego road in a sense, and we're letting that kind of weave us through the way we're doing it, we still know what's going to happen. We're still living it non-linearly. But as you saw, even if you're not even watching the show, and whether, that doesn't even matter. It's just the way that she's experienced it and how jarring it is to her is how it would be if a human's trying to jump and forth through time. I think The Time Traveler's Wife, that is a book and a movie, it kind of showed it kind of similar. I think it was a much more darkened way to show it, though, a much more sadder way to show it. Because when this person was doing it, they were jumping with their body, and they were always jumping into situations where they're about to get killed or something. There was always this really rough part to the way they did it. But we're always jumping through. It always bleeds over. They use the song Time in a Bottle at the end of the episode because it was the whole episode about time and how it winds in and out. But they were saying just for this one person, that was her skill. But it's all of our skills. There's no time in a bottle. There's no closed system. You can't close off, I'm just in this moment. Now I'm going to shift that in a minute, so I want you to remember me saying this. You are technically in this moment, but you're also jumping through all your other moments, and it all bleeds over. You're living through all your other moments, and it all bleeds over. So it gives you the feeling that you're jumping through. And in a way, you can say my consciousness is jumping through because everything's bleeding through, and you're letting that come in, so you know certain things. You have a feeling, I really want this to happen, all of a sudden that happens, or you could play, the other side with me and go, how come I thought that was going to happen and it never did happen? I was really strong, I was supposed to go this way, but I didn't go this way, I ended up going this way. How can I think something's going to happen and it doesn't happen? Now, we don't just have the one timeline, and that's where it gets a little more, I don't even want to say timey-wimey because that even gives you the illusion of time. Just think of it as you're going up a ladder, and every time you take a different, your body changes its frequency, you get up a different ladder, right? You're a different rung. Now the timeline's a little different, where you would have married this person in one timeline. Now we're just going to date this person for a couple years, or we might not date this person at all. because technically you already experienced it. Technically you already have seen the whole thing. So it doesn't have to occur because it's occurring in a different timeline. It's occurring in a different, and you can even look at each timeline as a dimension. It's in a different dimension, which that's going to change once you go through your awakening and ascension, because you're going to be able to see across the dimensions. And you're not just going to be locked on one human timeline, which is where we feel we're locked at, even though we're technically not locked, but that's where we feel. Our consciousness can only concentrate on one place at one time, because we're forming the illusion around us based on what our inner world's projecting, right? So it's kind of like in video games where they're like, how can these video games do this? Or if you even look at the simulation theory in creation, right, that we're creating the whole thing, or simulation theory is someone else who created the whole thing, but it's just us creating it. The farther away something is out, you really haven't formed it yet, right? It's just pixels. It's really not even there yet, but the closer you get, like if you're driving, the closer you get to that building, you're going to form the building. When you're far away from it, your consciousness isn't going to mess with forming it because you're not there yet. It doesn't matter. So when people say the future is locked, or faith, or destiny, and it has to go this way, if it has to go this way, I have no free will. Well, as humans, we don't have free will. That's correct. You are on one path, in a sense, and there are some beebs and wobs to it, or where I'm coming up with it. That's not even the way I want to say it, but that's how it keeps coming out. It's going to wind and shift a little bit, but there's only so much you can accomplish on a human timeline and a human consciousness. You know, there's not, you don't have the capacity to go farther than that. You haven't opened up to go farther than that, and you just don't have the capacity, you know, or really the interest in a sense. You're really focused on what you're focused on. You're forming that. And yes, it's bleeding through. So, because and you really notice it more when you're sleeping. When you're asleep, you're noticing your consciousness is jumping. You know, I'm jumping to different things. I'm seeing different things. I know this is about to happen. I'll always say everything super human traumatic that happens to us, we always knew it was coming. Whether you had a feeling, whether you dreamed about it, you knew it was coming. You know, you can say, oh, I was so shocked. Very rarely you're shocked. Even as humans, we're not really that shocked. We had an inkling something was going on. We're just not as honed in as later on. And we experience different, even tarot cards are a good, they were an example they used in this video, in that episode I'm referring to, they were doing tarot cards. Tarot cards are, people will say, it's just your higher versions of you picking, higher aspects of you picking the cards to show you something, right? But it's still all just you. And it's just you kind of saying, this is how this is going to be. Now, is it set in stone? Of course it's not set in stone. Unless we set it in stone. You know, we can set it in stone by the belief, okay, yeah, this is how this is going to go. Or this is how this has to be. So, yes, the future is set, but there's a lot of different futures set. You don't just have one outcome. There's a couple different outcomes you can go to. You know, it's like one of those books, I don't know if they even have them that much anymore. When I was a kid, they'd have them, and they would say, if you want to do this, then you go to page 22. If you want to go to this, you go to page 54. And you kind of followed your own path, and there were different adventures you could take. And your human templates are like that. You know, you can go different ways. You can zip and zag. You're going to learn the same lessons, accomplish the same things, sometimes with the same people, sometimes with different people. It's really not that complicated in a sense. You know, you're just going to go through it in that fashion. You'll feel things bleed through. You might not understand why. You've always heard that you could be married, and all of a sudden you meet someone else, you feel very attracted to that person, because in another human timeline you might have married that person. Or if you want to get more quantum, you know, which I'm going to go to in a second, when you get to your ascended timelines, you might see where, oh, in another dimension, I did marry that person. And I understand now why I felt that, because it bleeds over, you know. And we always say focus on where you are, because you're creating the future technically from where you are, and that's true. To me, though, more from your awakening and your ascension process. You really don't create much in your human process, because we're so just fixated on it has to be a certain way. We have to do it the way the human's supposed to do it, and we just don't understand how we're creating it. We don't understand how this has led to this and this has led to that. It's not linear. It's not linear in our human, but in our human consciousness creations, we don't see the patterns. We don't understand that me going to the store, going down this aisle, that has to do with something I did 4 years ago. Or in a different timeline. That's the connective points, but they're not a linear connection, so it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why, if you want to write a book, you might feel like, oh, all of a sudden I've got to go to Egypt for a vacation, or I got to go read about pyramids. Are you going to write about pyramids? No. Then why do you have to read about pyramids? I don't know. I just know that I have to. It doesn't really. You're going to write about, an ecosystem on bugs. It doesn't matter. But you feel like, oh, I got to read about pyramids first. And someone's going to say, well, that's not linear. That doesn't make any sense. But there's an activation with the pyramids that's going to unlock the knowledge for you to write that other book. And that's when I say they don't follow a linear path. And time doesn't really exist. And there is no linear path. But our human brain has to file it that way, because it cannot comprehend the vastness of what you're doing. And it's very disorienting. I can't even say that word. Disorientating to try to follow that path, to try to understand what's going on. It's when you see a lot of people start what a human system's going to say. It's they have a mental disorder, or they're not anchored in. They don't really know what's going on. They have different personalities. Whatever human beliefs, human consciousness is going to kind of fit someone in a box, because they can feel the movement. They can feel the jumping around. And unless you have gone through more understanding through an awakening and ascension, you don't have the capacity to really deal with it when everything starts bleeding through and you realize, yeah, I technically am jumping through. We talked a lot about people toward the end of their human experience. They will start to see things that people who've already been long gone, they'll be experiencing something that happened so many years ago, and you'll be like, oh, they're just imagining it. Or in one thing, because their veils are thinner. So yeah, they can feel themselves jumping through time and experiencing this all over again, or seeing different aspects of them and seeing people coming back and talking to them. It's still aspects of them, but they're seeing their field more. They're seeing how they're jumping around. But they can feel the jumping around, but they can't quite understand the jumping around. Like, you might feel sadness, really sad about nothing, and you don't even know why. You just feel sad today because of something that's going to happen maybe 3 years from now, or 15 years from now. We know how it ends. But we kind of try to shut a lot of that out, because we want the illusion of free will when we're in our human consciousness. We want to really think we have there are so many things we can do here. It's all been done. It's all been laid out. There's a reason you feel like you're supposed to go a certain way, but a lot of times we try to kind of override a lot of that. Even in our human consciousness, we'll be like, yeah, I feel that, but maybe not. So we'll go through a lot of different iterations to get to the same damn place. That's how our human mind works. It distracts us, it gets us into all these other things. Now, once we can kind of accept the fact we're always jumping around, our consciousness is always kind of jumping around, things are always bleeding through, everything is happening at the same time, there's no linear progression to your life, there's none of that. That is just how it's sold to us, in a sense. If we don't believe it, it's not true. It's not linear. When you start going through your awakening process, your ascension, you're not only jumping through, or your consciousness is kind of being able to open up to see. I'm going to call it jumping. You can call your consciousness expanding. I think jumping feels like it's a little more agency in jumping. We're kind of jumping around. Your consciousness is expanding into different dimensional timelines, right? And it does get confusing. In our human consciousness, we can't even comprehend it at all, right? And you would always see these people who imagined, you would see it more, it was more publicized, was like celebrities. This person thought they had a whole relationship with this celebrity and they never even knew them. But in their jumping around in different timelines, in different human timelines, they did know them. But they couldn't separate it out. That's why our mind, our human mind, human brain really separates all this stuff out. So we get the emotional bleed over. We might get the inclination of certain things. We might be prone to be attracted to certain people, prone to be attracted to certain things that are activating our consciousness in a certain way. Like, I feel like I really want to go to that bar. I really want to go to that restaurant. Oh, I want to work there. I feel like I want to work there. I'm going to work there one day. Deja vu. I know I've mentioned it. We're going to mention it again. We're going to do it again. We're always kind of being guided along. But when you go through your awakening and ascension, you start expanding so much. You start to really understand that you're not just jumping around you were not just jumping around your human timelines. Now you have the capacity to jump around your quantum timelines, different dimensional versions of yourself. All that stuff can bleed through too. So when we talk about our soul being in our human experience, in our human experiment, however you want to say it, our soul being separated off. It's separated off because we betray our soul so many times along the way to get what we want, whether it be money, success, fame, affection. We divide ourselves off, right? That's why there's so many people in our lives as humans, in a sense, because so many different aspects of us. There's so many different us running around, different aspects of us showing us different parts of ourselves. And we can't even comprehend all that. But when you go through your awakening and then your ascension, you start to be able to have the capacity. Your consciousness expands enough where you can start to see that. And you can understand that I know why I'm attracted to this person. I have soul contracts with this person. I am in a different reality. I have experienced a relationship with this person. That might not mean in this moment, in this timeline I'm in now, I'm going to experience a relationship with them now. And is it confusing? Sometimes it is a little bit confusing. I'm not going to lie, especially when you start to really see a lot of your field, and not just you're no longer limited to just your human field. Now you can see your quantum field, and you can see how many versions of you there are. The Atlantic version of you, the Lemurian version of you, the mermaid version of you, the merman version of you. There's so many different iterations and different dimensions. People call them, timelines. You can call them different dimensions. There's so many different ones that you do now have the capacity to jump more and jump quicker and get your frequency up higher, where you can experience the higher frequency timelines you or do not have access to in your human consciousness. Your human consciousness cannot get to those timelines. You have to transcend that human consciousness, and that doesn't mean it goes away. You just are no longer living and letting that consciousness rule your decisions anymore. You're not letting your human consciousness decide which way you're going to go. Because it's always going to pick the most selfish way. Our human consciousness is out for one person, and that's itself. And if you try to convince yourself your human consciousness has anyone else in mind, it doesn't. I'll guarantee you. If you dig deep enough on any choice you made as a human, at the bottom of that, it's going to be, it was all about me. Whether I wanted to be propped as a hero there, wanted to be a savior there, no matter what it was always something about me that I wanted at the end. If I'm super honest about it and I really peel that onion back, it was all about me. I wanted the credit. I wanted this. I wanted that person to really like me. So I really went overboard and trying to do everything I could for them because I wanted to be in their world. I wanted to do that. It was all for me. That's our human consciousness. It's all for us. It's not about anybody else. And if we try to pretend it is, we're just lying to ourselves. But if we can accept that and say, okay, my human consciousness, it's all about me. It is driven by the ego. It is driven by very distorted human beliefs that are not even true. It separates us. It divides us. That's what it does. That's what it's trying to do. It's all about itself. There's no, there's no I in team. Okay, what was it? No, there's no, it was that old commercial where the guy's like, there's no I in team. And the guy was like, there's no we either. And that's your ego. There's no we in there. It's just me. There's no we in there. It's just what's going on with me. But how we kind of balance that with everyone is everyone else's ego is doing the same thing. It's not just our ego is corrupt or just distrusted. Can't really trust it. Neither can we do with anybody else's. So we're all on the level playing field here because everyone is in the same place. Everyone's ego is doing the same thing. It's not just ours. It's everybody's, right? So we understand that. We can comprehend that and go, okay, it's not just me. It's everybody. Everyone's ego is in it for themselves. And that's when that becomes super clear, when you start transcending that. And the ego's still in there, it's just no longer making your choices. And you have other things that are able to come in, higher aspects of you that are able to come in to make decisions based on what's aligned with your soul, not what's aligned with your human anymore. Then you really can see the transparency of the human ego, because it is just like a glass window. You can see right through that thing. You can tell when people show up, when they're talking through their ego, when everyone's trying to separate and just get everyone to fight amongst themselves. And people don't even know what they're fighting about anymore. It's just, let's divide everybody up and get everyone to fight amongst themselves. That way no one can come together. Because the key of consciousness is everyone's got to come together at some point. And the human world is going to get increasingly hard to live in separated until everyone comes together. It's just how it's going to be. It's just, there's no getting around that. We all have to be able to come together. If we all could take care, I'm going to sidetrack for just a minute, but if we look at just our community, if we took care of the animals in our community, you don't need Humane Society in your community, because you're taking care of the animals within your community. Everyone's taking care of the animals in your community. Everyone in the other community is taking care of all the animals in their community. You don't need someone else coming in to take care of what humans aren't taking care of. And the same things with people. If we all took care of each other, you don't need every organization to come in and do that. It's doing that because the human ego won't do that. It's too selfish and too motivated in on itself. And even the organizations that are created by the human consciousness are the same way. So when we start moving out of that, and when you start getting more into your ascended consciousness, and transcending and clearing out the programming that keeps us bound to there's only one timeline, or this is how time works, we start to see that's not how time works. And to get back to what I was saying, it can be a little confusing at first, because you do feel very strongly that you're supposed to, in one iteration, you have a relationship with this person, but you can look at it and go, but in this timeline, that's not highest aligned for me, because I know where that would end up here, because that person is a different frequency than I'm at right now. It's a different consciousness level. You might have something you can do with them, an agreement to do something with them to help them raise their consciousness, to play a role in their awakening. But you're going to find in general, a lot of the stuff we see, we understand that maybe not here. And we call that kind of quantum jumping. You see that word thrown around a lot. What is that? You're just jumping through different timelines. You're going quicker. No, I'm not going to have a relationship with this person. Or if you feel like I'm going to move to the city, maybe I'm not. Because when I look at that job, it kind of looks like this job. I've already gone through that. Do I need that experience again? I don't. I'm going to shut that down. I'm not going to experience that. I'm going to kind of bypass that. And when you're in your ascended timelines, you can bypass certain things. You don't have to spend 6 years in a marriage with someone that you know where that shit ends. You might spend 6 weeks in a relationship with them and move on, because you have fulfilled the contract. You've activated their consciousness. They've helped you clear whatever you're supposed to be clearing, because it is a two-way street. People come together for clearing, for activations. That's why we come together. That's why we have relationships. That's why they're so difficult. Whether in your human consciousness or your ascended consciousness, relationships remain very difficult. Because, maybe difficult's not the best word, but we're going to be truthful about it. It's challenging because people are of different consciousness. Everyone doesn't want the same thing. Even in ascended timelines, people don't want the same thing. People have different definitions of what their ascended timelines are. What's heaven look like to them? What's it look like to you? You can have the same consciousness with the person, but not really enjoy their energy, really want to be around them. Doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with either one of you. It just doesn't feel like it's going to work. We don't have the same purpose. We have different visions of what we want to do. Doesn't mean we can't come together and create something for a while, but long term, it's not going to really work, because we can see that. Because we can see in a timeline it didn't work, and as a human, we want to rush the timelines, and even in our ascended realities, we try to rush the timelines, but we no longer have the human. We can see that it doesn't work, right? Because in our human, we try to get to the end of that. I had a dream. I dreamed this happened. Now I'm going to try to put this into play. I'm going to make this happen. Okay. So we're going to play that out. Or, I know I'm going to meet that person. Well, there's that person over there. I'm going to go over and talk to them. That person doesn't come over and talk to me. I'm just going to go over and talk. I'm going to start this timeline, because I know I'm supposed to meet this person, right? Let me just go over there and get it started. Well, now that we've done that, it's kind of like counting your chickens before they hatch. The minute we try to push something that's not really ready to hatch, in a sense, we're trying to make something happen because we see, oh, that's going to happen. Let me push that forward. We're shifting the frequency. Our ego's now in it. We're trying to control it. We're not just trying to see it. And that was a really good quote from the witchy Agatha show I watched, where it was like, you're not supposed to control it. You're supposed to just see it. That doesn't mean we don't have any agency to code through it. But as humans, we want to control it. Like, oh, I really want to go do that. We don't let it unfold naturally. And that's why the timelines end up so corrupted and bastardized in a way. Because the frequency we originally see the timeline in is not the frequency we're allowing it to come in at, because we don't want to wait to get our body to that frequency to experience that timeline the way we saw it. We want to cut to the chase. We want to get to it quicker. We don't want to wait for that experience. So the more we push these things, the more they come in a different frequency. So it just all gets the reality gets redesigned, and all of a sudden the timeline I looked at was up here, but now I'm in this one down here, and this one's kind of crummy, and I thought it would work out differently, but it's not working out differently. Some people will say, oh, and I used to even do videos on this years and years ago, like Dreaming the Future. We're just jumping our conscious to a different point in time. And whether it's our human consciousness and we're starting to jump to just our human timelines, or it's our ascended consciousness and we're able to jump through different dimensional timelines, because we can see through it all. And we understand. We also start to understand, after many years of trying to force those timelines, that you have to let them come in organically. You have to give yourself the time. That's why you might jump to a point in your timeline, or jump up to a different timeline and see something happening. Maybe we'll use the same example. I'm supposed to meet that person. We're supposed to do this thing together. But you might not even be able to jump to the point yet where you know exactly what that thing is yet. But you're supposed to do something with them. You've seen yourself working together on something. And you see that person. And you might never have met that person, but you just saw them. Or maybe it's someone you've seen around, and you always felt like, oh, I really like that person. I don't know why. I don't even know them. But I feel attracted, that I want to talk to them, right? There's something I want to talk to them about, but I don't even know what it is yet. And then maybe later on you kind of say, yeah, I kind of do. But you're also like, I can't go over there and just talk to them. I knew my rules. My ascended conscious started to understand that I has to come in organically, because you're not ready. And you're trying to almost use that timeline as a crutch, right? You don't want to do the work to get there. Humans want to shortcut it. And it takes a while to work through that programming where we don't want to shortcut it anymore. We don't want to jump. We want to kind of take our time. We want to let ourselves clear. We might not like the path we have to go on until we can get there, but we do understand that we have to do that. We have to let it come in organically. Why, instead of you going over there and just talking to this person, all of a sudden they're coming over to talk to you. Or you just bump into them on the street. You'll be surprised how organically these things can come in when we're not trying to pull them in, manually pull them in, because energetically you are pulling them in. You're just not, or you're actually, think of it more like you're pulling yourself up to those timelines. You're not trying to pull that timeline down to you. You're raising yourself up to that timeline, because there is a difference in the frequency of the timelines. And you'll even see, especially in your ascended timelines, because you start to, when I say you have the consciousness to understand why they're taking place that way. If you try to force it, it won't. Usually just nothing will happen with it. And you'll be like, oh, that didn't even work. Nothing happened. And then you're waiting another 6 months, and then it might come back around again, because you're trying to put yourself somewhere you're not kind of ready to be yet. You're trying to kind of do it the other way. You're trying to jump to a part in time where you don't really belong there yet. It's not time for that yet. You have to get there. You have to go through certain things to where that unfolds that way. So you just have more knowledge of all of that. So I do want to check. I want to check my. I've been kind of really. I wanted to get that out there. Okay. Oh, what are we talking about? I always get that. What are we talking about? Today we're talking about time and the illusion of time not even being there. I'm trying to think of some more examples of how we do it and don't realize we do it. I would definitely categorize it as is our human consciousness. We definitely go through more feeling. People call it intuition. I just kind of know, especially as kids, we have a very strong thing of different things you want to go do, a very strong, look at the kind of thing you're drawn to. Look at where you're getting pulled to. In our human consciousness, that's a big red flag that, technically we're jumping around a little bit, right? Our subconsciousness, because we can't see it consciously yet. When you go through your ascension, you gain to see it consciously. One, you can be trusted with the knowledge. You can't unlock any of this stuff anymore unless you can be trusted with it, right? It means you have to clear a certain amount of your human programming to get even bits and pieces of how everything connects. You're not allowed to, it won't just be locked off to you. You only go so far. You can see people that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, whether it be however they're communicating and reading their field into metaphysics. It doesn't matter which route they're going. They're all different paths to ascension. It doesn't matter. People will get they'll stay in one place for a long period of time. And they'll kind of just still be in that place. And their skills aren't really growing past where they were because they're not going to clear the programming they have to go to clear. They're not wanting to do that part, so in a way you get knocked down to a different timeline. You're knocked back down to a human timeline or some kind of maybe mixed timeline, but really there's so many different frequencies. That's more fourth dimensional timelines where you can feel some of the fifth dimensional, but you're still kind of trying to live in the third dimensional human timelines, and you're not really allowing yourself to go to the fifth dimensional timelines and higher, and there's so many different iterations in that. The future is not you're going to create it. Which one are we creating? And there's different timelines. You're going to create whatever you want to. That's how you have all these ideas. People think, they come out of nowhere. They come out of nowhere. You're jumping around. You're seeing it. You have access to it. But as a human, we don't realize that's what we're doing. We come up with every other excuse in the book that's not what we're doing. And it can be just as crazy and ludicrous, but our human consciousness, if someone with a PhD says that's what it is, we're like, yeah, that makes total sense. And it can be the most confusing thing you will ever hear. And you'll be like, oh yeah, that's probably what it is. Dreams are just me working out my inner turmoil of my day. Really? Do we really believe that? We really think that's all we can do when we're dreaming? We really think that's it? It's that mundane and boring? That's all we're doing is we care so much about our human experience that when our consciousness has room to play, we're going to sit there and dwell on that stupid ass shit? We don't care. Your soul doesn't really care that much about your human experience. It just knows it has to get to a certain point with it to clear enough to actually be able to get back in the body and be able to try to hold all your other pieces of your soul that have been ripped apart as we've just been ripped apart over all the different lifetimes we've led in human bodies and how many times we betray our soul. For money, for fame, for whatever. You will see a stark difference in how you act in your ascended timelines and how you would have acted in your human timelines. Even in your ascended timelines, there are still going to be things you see that you have the choice. Human, no choice. You have no choice in human timelines. You just don't. I would like to get you a better picture of human timelines, but you really just don't have a lot of choice. You're then going to go through your ascended timelines, or you're going to be stuck in your human one so you get to the very inevitable end of the human timeline, and that's it. Yes, you're technically raising your frequency. Yes, you're going through your soul contracts. Yes, you're doing all those things. But you're not technically really transitioning to anything else but the human timelines because you're still living by the human beliefs. Until we get past all that, until you start transcending the human beliefs and really being able to break it down and go, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Now you can go back and listen. Once you've gone through so many timelines in ascension and brought so much of yourself back in, you can look at different things in the human consciousness and be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense at all. I can't believe I even listened to that at one point. But like, yeah, that makes total sense. Because you'll notice the human time, they change, right? And that's the whole thing about the timelines. when you get to a different timeline, technically your past is different. So that's why people don't remember everything the same way. Everyone's in a different time. Everyone's in a different frequency, in a different timeline. They don't remember it the same way you remember it because that's not how it happened for them. They don't remember things the same way because when you get into a different timeline, you technically then upgrade what happened to you before, or you don't remember it at all. There's no coincidence. Every time I come on here and have to redo all my settings of my phone because I'm in a different timeline. I never did it in this timeline, so I got to redo it again. So, okay, I think that's been long enough today. If I have anything else to say about this, I'll probably do a video on it. But I think that's a good way to kind of start to where we can start to pick apart our timelines. And whether you want to call it you're traveling, your consciousness is exploring it, you're jumping through it. I kind of like the jumping through it. I thought it was a good physical recommendation, a physical way to look at what we're doing. That sounds kind of fun, that we're able to do that and see what we're able to see. Because anything you can think about, you've already done it on some timeline somewhere, or you couldn't think about it. When the best thing about once you get into your ascended timelines and can see, you really do see that you do create the whole thing and did all revolve around you. And once you can empower yourself with that, then you can start seeing what you can do to assist other people. But we can't really do that until we get to a certain place within ourselves where we were not tainted by our human consciousness to want to still do it for us. And that takes years. Okay? Anyone who says that doesn't, they just haven't done it yet. Because it does. We have too much human programming. There's too much conditioning. We're hit too much with it everywhere we go until we start pushing that stuff out of our life. Because the human condition, it is a cult mentality. No matter what side you're on, and I say side, it doesn't even, maybe side's not even the word, no matter what collectives, if they're still human collectives, there's a cult mentality in there. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, you get very much tossed out. You have to conform to certain things. And we see that more when the stress of the world gets higher, and you saw a lot of this during when you went through the COVID realities, everything gets more conditioned, right? Do this or you're not this, or do this and you have to do it this way. If you don't do it this way, then you don't care about people. You really start to see the messaging become very transparent. And you can argue, but you can see it as, is it that transparent, or is my conscious to the point I can see the transparency in it? So I think I'm going to leave it on that. And I will see everyone next time.